ticklish business any way you look at it. Come on, we'll stick together.
Welcome back to another episode of Ticklish Business, the podcast all about honoring and celebrating classic movies. And we have a birthday tribute of epic proportions this episode because at the time of recording, it's already happened, but we're still celebrating anyway. It's the 80th birthday of the wonderful, awesome, immortal, as far as I'm concerned, Liza Minnelli. And to celebrate with us, I have a great guest, the director of a fantastic documentary about Liza that everybody should see. Its director, Bruce David Klein. Bruce, how are you?
Doing great. It's really Liza month this month.
It is. March should just be called Liza month. I'm all for this. Before we get into that, I'd love to remind everybody that your Patreon dollars help keep the lights on at Ticklish Biz HQ and lets us do all sorts of fun stuff, including our bonus series that we have, the swag drops that I give, and all sorts of fun stuff. Patrons get episodes 48 hours early, and they also get to hear about the upcoming walking tour that I'm going to be giving leading up to the TCM Classic Film Festival. So if you want to learn more, it starts at just $1 at patreon.com/ticklishbiz. And if you are watching these episodes on our YouTube channel, we thank you because I am actually doing stuff with YouTube now. If you aren't, head over to youtube.com/@ticklishbusiness and subscribe over there so that you can watch me talk to awesome people. If you're listening to this podcast wherever you are getting your podcast, I also thank you because any ears are welcome. So let's jump into this. I mean, Bruce, your documentary about Liza is required viewing, in my opinion. It's awesome. I know you've told me the story before because we've talked before, but for people that don't know, how did you come to the world of Liza Minnelli? What is it about her that grabbed your interest? Give us some background on how you came to discover her.
Sure. It's actually a long and interesting history, at least for me. Where, I say that when Cabaret first came out, I was too young to see it. And I remember, seeing in front of movie theaters the poster that to me looked so naughty and just forbidden. And certainly the fact that I was too young to see it made it even more naughty and more forbidden. So I wasn't able to see it. Cut to 1980, and I'm a little older. I could see actual movies that have some grit. And I saw Arthur. And I remember saying to myself, wow, that is an incredible comedic actress. Is she a famous comedian? Who is she? And then, of course, the light bulb went off. Oh my God, she was the one on that poster. I can't believe it. So I went back, obviously, watched some of her early movies, and then cut to 2008. In 2008, as you may remember, Liza had just gone through some difficult health problems. She had obviously overcome a crazy marriage. There was a lot of question. She had hip operation surgery. There was a lot of question. Could she still walk? Could she still sing? But she booked the Palace Theater, of course, with the great resonance with her mother. Liza's at the Palace. And I went to see it. And I will never forget it because before she came out, there was like a hush in the audience. And it was like all these people who loved her. And I was, a arm's length Liza fan. I always thought she was talented. But these people were crazy Liza fans. And I'll never forget the hush. Will she be able to dance and sing and whatever? And then she came out and the spot went on her and she did one of her kind of signature Liza hand movements. And the audience lost its mind in a way I have never seen before or after. And I remember vividly the standing ovation they gave her at that moment. There were people not just standing, people standing on the Broadway chairs, literally with tears, men and women with tears streaming down their cheeks. And I remember at that moment, I was watching the audience actually, and I said, I have never seen to have that intense, profound connection with your audience in a way that goes far beyond, I really love her music. Oh, I loved Cabaret. Oh, she's such a good dancer. She's such a great, it's way beyond that. And like, what's going on there? So I kind of filed that in the back of my brain, and I became kind of a Liza fan. And then when we started talking to Liza and her people about the possibility of developing a film around her, they said kind of the magic words to a filmmaker, a documentarian certainly, is, oh, by the way, I don't know if you're interested, but we have 25 hours of never before seen footage that was taken in 1975 at the height of her iconic status. And would you want to see it? And of course, after our jaws kind of just went slack and we were like pinching ourselves, they sent us some samples of the footage and we started looking at it. We hit play and we saw this explosive, one of a kind talent. This woman at her height, her eyes sparkling, her body movements. She was both vulnerable and sexy and sometimes intellectual and sometimes goofy like a schoolgirl. She was so unbelievably just calling us, come in, listen to me, I'm interesting. So at that moment, when we went back to kind of her and her team, and we said, look, we could do what's known as a cradle to grave biography of her, where then she did this movie, then she did this song, then she did this show, then she, which is very boring to me, I think for the audience as well. And it became clear after seeing this footage that her story was very much the story of how, after in 1969, the tragic death of her mother, Judy, she was a little, what do I do now? How do I make my own kind of, plant a stake in this thing called entertainment? And what she did was so interesting to me. She actually went out and she sought out mentors who would really, really fine tune her raw talent. And she obviously, unlike normal people who seek out mentors, her mentors, well, she wanted to learn dance, so she connected with Bob Fosse.
As one does. As one does.
As one does. She needed a great lyricist to kind of be her voice, write the words that her voice would connect with. And it's Fred Ebb of Candor and Ebb. So she needed a look that was all her own. And oh, by George, there's Halston. So her talent at picking people, and she actually says it in the film, as you know, she says, in the end, I think my greatest talent was the ability to choose the right people to help me. So that's a long way of saying that my connection with Liza evolved over a very, very long period of time and ultimately was always brought home by her raw talent. Because with Liza, that's ultimately what it is. And I felt so strongly that so many people, especially younger people, of whom, as we took the film out, I would say 30, 40% of the people out there, certainly people under like 35, think she's a sitcom actress and don't know, shock of shocks, that her mother is Judy Garland. Ugh. Shock of shocks. So, we felt that she needed a corrective to say, okay, we all know Liza from the tabloids the last 10, 20 years, health issues and bad marriage and all this kind of stuff, rehab. But let's not forget why we even mention her name. Okay. And let's go back to the raw talent. And we kept getting brought back to, oh my God, what a talent. The movie Sterile Cuckoo, I know we're a movie podcast here. The Sterile Cuckoo, which is kind of a forgotten movie in general, in the zeitgeist. Okay. What an incredible movie, both for its time, both for the fact that it was, Alan J. Pakula's first directorial effort, but the telephone scene in that movie which I think that should be like every human being should watch that television, that telephone scene, let alone people who have never seen that movie and who like cinema. First of all, you claim to like cinema and have never seen that. That's another question. But oh my God, in 5 minutes, I was told she did it in one take. Literally, they turned the camera on. She picked up the phone. And, for those who don't know, she's kind of this very quirky, almost quasi psychotic character who is obsessed with this boy at college, and he goes home for Christmas vacation and she wants to come see him. Of course, he's a little skittish about her coming because she's so quirky and meet her parents. And she's basically for 5 minutes trying to plead and needle and prod and do everything she possibly can to talk him into spending the holidays with her. And she breaks down. Any moment you feel like she's about to commit suicide. And it is one of the greatest 5 minute. I mean, Mia Farrow told me she thought it was like the best 5 minute acting performance ever. And if you watch it, I defy you to disagree. I mean, and yet, again, forgotten. So, and one of the sad things about making our film on her is that we had to cut the sterile cuckoo sequence because we had a whole thing, it was edited, but it fell outside of our timeline and it took us a little off. But I highly recommend as an addendum to watching the documentary and learning about Liza, to watch the sterile cuckoo. It was such a goofy, crazy, incredible, intense picture,
But you bring up something that I think does not get enough discussion in terms of Liza's career is the swing she took cinematically.
Yes.
And there had always been, and feel free to jump in and correct me if I'm wrong, I know she's talked about people automatically wanted to know how much she was like her mom. Was she going to just make musicals? Is she going to can she sing as good as her mom? Can she dance as good as her mom? Can she act? I mean, she'd technically been acting since she was 3 years old in the good old summertime. But yet for her to go from working with Fosse to doing the sterile cuckoo to working with her father to jumping to television, and how do you look at her career choices? Because I think much like another great one, Madonna, Liza's always been on the cutting edge of like almost reading the tea leaves of what where film and television is going. And she very much, to me at least in her film work, seemed to be doing what the guys were doing in the 70s, which was taking those big swings and making the uncommercial picture.
Interesting. Yeah. I mean, I think I wasn't there in the 70s with her, but knowing kind of Liza to a certain amount and certainly studying every aspect of her career at every phase of her life, one thing that is really true about Liza as a person that I think comes through in everything she does, she's a very whimsical person. She has a childlike whimsy to her. And you could imagine her making a lot of these decisions fairly like in the moment, based on personality, based upon relationship, based on how she feels, which is why, I know critics say, well, she came off this really serious, cabaret, like, wow, what an intense, incredible movie. And suddenly she's in like Lucky Lady with Burt Reynolds and Gene Hackman. How does that happen? And as I said, I think where she's a very serious actress and she takes her work very seriously, I think her personality is very whimsical. I mean, you could just see, she's doing New York, New York with Martin Scorsese. And then it's like, hey, let's do a show together. All right, let's do it. Yeah, and suddenly they do, a cocaine fueled show, to do it. I do think, though, a lot of her role choices, or I should say the most seminal role choice she made, is very psychological, almost Freudian psychoanalytic, in the sense that her mother dies and her mother and father together. Basically, when we think of the grand old colorful MGM musical, they're it. Okay.
Oh,
Her
yeah.
father invented that look, that texture, that camera movement, the colors, the attention to detail. And obviously, Judy starred in so many of them, whether it be Me in St. Louis, I mean, everything. And so they were the pinnacle of what you think of when you think of an MGM musical. And yet, her mother dies in 1969. She's kind of recovering in 1970, Liza. And her first big movie role that she chooses is Cabaret, the movie that single-handedly, you could argue, caused the death of the old-fashioned musical.
Yeah, very much so.
The film that said, okay, musicals aren't bright and moons and Junes and colorful. They are dark. It's about Nazis and really, really complex storylines of politics, of bisexuality, of all of these things. The fact that in her seminal moment as a choice making artist, she chooses to do the film that is the exact opposite of what her mother and father did.
It's so audacious.
It's so radical and so audacious. And it really is. I mean, to think about, it's 1971 and you pick up a script and you're reading the script that, whoa, what is this? Like two men and woman, they're like dancing and they're kind of making out and they're, whoa!
Is Sally Bowles a sex worker? Like what's the lines here? And promiscuity and fascism, all of it. It's got every anti-musical thing.
Every anti-musical thing. And yet, in some ways, an old-fashioned musical score, and yet lyrics, whatever, that had this layer of darkness. So I do think there is something to be said, certainly from a psychoanalysis standpoint, that she chose this, because this was, I don't know how you could read it other than saying fuck you to what she grew up in and the golden era of Hollywood, whatever. It's like, no, I am my own person. This is a new era. We are freer. We are more out there, more honest about who we are. And I think that's very, very, very telling. And yet, and this is the amazing thing about Liza's career, suddenly she gets to Arthur, okay, where she's kind of the straight woman to the drunk, over-the-top performer, and she kills it. If you saw, and that's why I said I was confused when I saw Arthur, that she was the same one in Cabaret. If you saw only Cabaret, you would say, this woman has impeccable comic timing. This woman, could deliver a line better than anyone. And yet, I mean, that's the only kind of film like that she did. So very, very, very interesting.
Well, I think what people love about her now, and you're totally right, not a day goes by that I don't see my Instagram algorithm with breaking news, Liza Minnelli is Judy Garland's daughter. It happens more often than you would think. But I think for people that are old Hollywood fans, she kind of is one of the few living links between that old Hollywood and the new Hollywood. I mean, to hear her, it's one of my dreams to, sit at Liza's feet, metaphorically speaking, and hear her just tell stories about Judy Garland and living in that time period. I mean, we don't have enough of those tangible connections to that landscape. And I would assume, and this is just, I think, kind of armchair discussion on our part, but I would feel that also gives a ton of pressure to a person to be that link, to have so much history kind of weighing on your shoulders from the minute you're born.
And without question, and especially, I always say, if you look at the interviews with her, with journalists in the 60s before her mother died, every question, will you, ever dance as well as your mother? Will you ever sing as well as your mother? How does it feel? And that's really, really tough. We had, speaking about that kind of old Hollywood, the golden age, if you will, we had this moment that did not appear in the film, for a whole bunch of reasons. Usually there are things in every film that you kind of kill yourself. I can't put this in, but it's so
I
good.
just had to do a manuscript edit and cut 20,000 words. So
You
precious.
know the pain. You know the
Everything is
pain.
precious. Yes.
Everything is precious. What this was precious. At one point, we actually took Liza in a limo driving through basically her childhood.
Oh my
And
gosh.
this is the house I grew up in, and this is thing. And she was rolling. She was on a, oh, this is Frank Sinatra's house. But what really came about that was so interesting was the way she made it sound was that Hollywood in those days and what she grew up into was essentially like working in a steel town. It was a steel mill. Hollywood was a steel mill. Her father would come down. He would have, mom would cook pancakes or oatmeal or whatever the breakfast was. He'd have his coffee. He'd read Variety in the newspapers. He'd then go, he would drive to the studio. He'd be there by, 8:30, 9 o'clock, whatever it was, a normal hour. And then he would come home for dinner at 5 or 6. And all of the people who lived by her, I know Bogart was one. I'm trying to think I forgot who lived next door to her. But, they all did the same thing. So when the fathers and mothers, the stars, went to the studios, and the spouses were home and the kids were home, they would all just do like normal kids. Dad's at work, mom's at work. And it just felt so ordinary. And I always thought when you would hear Liza talk about that it was an affectation, that it was like her trying to be humble, whatever.
Right.
No, it was really true. It was literally, she did not think, and Lorna says the same thing, we didn't think, like, there was nothing weird. This is, oh, my mom had to go to work. All right, we're not going to see her today until 6 o'clock. So that, I think, is really, really interesting. On the other hand, there were very, very unique things in that community as the kids were growing up. So one thing they learned, which Liza talks about all the time, is that you never say anything bad about anybody. Okay. And that is so much the MGM way, right? It's like you're always tap dancing, on the top of tables, and the world is wonderful and it's glowing. And even though you were just brought into rehab, it's fantastic. It is great. And Liza has this interesting personality kind of clash in between her, because on one hand, she is so honest and she'll say whatever comes to her mind, and she's super open. And on the other hand, she still has some remnants of that never let people tell you whatever.
That gentility type of element.
Exactly. And, that's why I left in the film. There's, a moment in the film when I ask her about Studio 54. And the first thing she says is, there were no drugs at Studio 54. And the way she says it is she says it very definitively. And, that was a remnant. And I kept it in specifically because that was a remnant of her kind of MGM daughter past, that everything is always good. You never, don't tell them about, you and Andy Warhol snorting coke off, Bianca Jagger's stomach or whatever. They don't need to know that.
It's still such a huge divide, I think, in the classic film community. I don't know how much time you spend in the classic film community, but it's a huge thing. We're still debating the merits of Christina Crawford writing Mommy Dearest, decades later. People are still very sensitive when you bring up the question of, like, was this person actually gay in that time period? I think there is still this real push and pull between those two things, that trying to preserve the insular world of old Hollywood, but also being contemporary and having those viewpoints of, like, yeah, no, there was all of this that was going on. And for me, I love the mess. I love the drug fueled stories, because I think I think that makes it, that's also part of the fantasy, right? This dream factory of like hedonism, where they were still able to turn in the work, but then also there was this whole underbelly that was just kind of accepted.
If you look at, one doesn't exist. We've pieced together some of it, but if you look at like One Day in the Life of Liza Minnelli in 1977, you just can't fucking believe it. I mean, I mean, I assume it would be true if you looked at, like Taylor Swift's lives today, when she was on, but oh my God. And I often quote, just because it captures like in a nutshell, one tiny aspect of her life during that time. In the Andy Warhol diaries, Andy has a little section on one of the days, an entry where he says, I'm going to paraphrase, I was walking up Madison Avenue with Liza and her husband, Jack Haley, today. He said, and Martin Scorsese came out of nowhere, saw us, and started yelling at Liza, Liza, how could you be cheating on me with Baryshnikov? Okay. So again, to be clear, Liza's with her husband.
Yep.
Martin Scorsese, who she is having an affair with, runs up to her and says, "You're cheating on me with Baryshnikov." How can you not get better?
And Scorsese was married as well at the time.
He certainly was.
Everybody, and I think that's the old Hollywood thing that I don't think, people assume it's like low hanging fruit. Oh, why would you? No, these are the interdynamics. My co host and I would joke about how small the old Hollywood wreath. It's really a wreath. It's not even a family tree because everybody was just kind of hooking up with everybody else and interacting. It's a very small pool. And I think I missed that in the age of like where we are now with cinema.
It was, yeah, I mean, I hate to say it. It sounds like a really fun life.
Right.
I mean, again, many of them had consequences and,
Sure.
there were early deaths and tragic deaths because of, various things and overdoses and all that kind of stuff. And also, I mean, the pain, particularly of the gay men of that era.
Yeah.
And how painful that must have been. I mean, it wasn't even like the 70s when you were just in the closet. It was like, I don't know, you were in the closet. You were dug in a tunnel under the ground.
You were getting married and at least having one child to just like 100% confirm.
Yeah, and then you look at, I mean, that went pretty far. I mean, you think of Rock Hudson.
Yeah.
I mean, what year was it in the 80s that it was like he has AIDS. Oh my God. Is he gay? And that was the 80s. So you could imagine, my God, in the 40s and the 50s, you hear some of the names at this point. I know I saw, I forgot who wrote it, a show about Cary Grant's bisexuality. I mean, just, my God, what lives they led.
Well, and at the same time, you hear about people like, Billy Haynes in the 30s, who was a gay actor who refused to conform and refused to have a show marriage and became an incredibly successful interior decorator in Los Angeles and lived a very happy life.
God bless.
Partner, it's great. I mean, as we talk about all of this, was there ever anything that was off limits talking with Liza?
No. Yes and no. There was nothing off limits. As I told you, I assume last time, the story of when we were wrapping to shoot one day at her place and we were all walking out and the crew was walking out and she left word, please have Bruce come back. So I came back and she was in her bedroom sitting on the edge of her bed. And she's like, I wanted to talk to you. I'm like, oh my God, what could this be about? And she reached up and she grabbed my hand and started petting my hand and looked up at me with the eyes. And she said, Bruce, please don't put anything phony in the movie. Don't make me look like a phony. So, that was a shocking moment because I'm used to in my whole career, when you do a documentary on somebody, there's usually the friction of, no, you
Yeah.
can't put that in, or my hair looks bad there, or whatever. She was the opposite. So I think that was great. I think in terms of asking anything, I asked everything, and certainly in the film, she opens up a lot that she hasn't in the past, certainly about the substance abuse and some stuff about her mom. So I felt very comfortable to ask anything. The only difference was the question was, what kind of answer would you get? So are you getting an answer that's 100% like from the heart, from the raw, or is there a little bit of that MGM kind of filter? So I asked anything and she answered. So then the question as a documentarian is, okay, well, how accurate is this? So the extreme example was talking about Studio 54 when she said, oh, nobody did drugs then. So that was a form of being off limits, but I asked her a bunch of questions. And what I came to realize is that Liza really wants to make this statement that Studio 54 for her was about the cultural connections and being there with Andy Warhol and all these Halston and all these brilliant, just really creative, edgy people, and being there and having fun. And yes, they went to the basement and did cocaine. And yes, incredible amounts of wild sex with various partners happened. But it's for me about cultural. So that's the reason, as I said before, I kept that her answer in the film, because I wanted, kind of to wink at the audience and say, look, she's a sometimes very accurate narrator. Sometimes she may be a little unreliable, but along the way, we're learning who the real Liza is. And, we obviously look forward to her memoir that's coming out in next week or in a couple of weeks.
I was going to say, I know you hadn't read it when we talked previously. You don't have the inside. I would have thought she'd have airdropped you a manuscript or something.
No, the only thing I do know is that it was based on conversations that she recorded with Michael Feinstein over the years. So because we interviewed Michael for so long, many, many hours, and Liza for many, many hours, I think we got a lot of the flavor. It'll be interesting to see what other kind of stuff comes up. Certainly they are promoting it as her tell all, and I hope it is, because she has an incredible story, and you realize there is nobody else like her. I mean, there's just nobody else like her. Nobody has the past and the history. Nobody, gave the goods at her height. Nobody had some really interesting things as she developed, as she matured. Nobody's been through as much. I mean, it's an incredible story, and hopefully the book, adds another layer to the film.
Well, I mean, to go out further, it's been really fascinating as a classic film fan. We have this doc. There was a great documentary about Faye Dunaway, I think that came out a year or two ago. We got another one about Liz Taylor. I feel like there's this real desire to understand a lot of the women, the icons of the 70s in this really human way that I'm curious to get your thoughts on kind of what the allure might be today to contemporary audiences. Is it just because part of me thinks, well, it's because we're finally ready to hear it. We're finally ready to hear about the good and the bad and take these, women for the people that they are. I mean, Liza, I know historically she's had some horrible things said about her, and perpetuated that she's crazy and all of these things. And now, do you think that part of the joy of bringing a story like this is that audiences are finally ready to hear and accept beyond what they've been told?
I think it's two things. I think one reason that a lot of these films are being made now, honestly, are business and financial reasons. And the reason is there are so few people who, you just say, you know exactly who you're talking about.
Yep.
There's automatic interest, there's a built-in audience. And so I think that's one very, very, very big reason. The other reason is that I think icons reach a point in their life when they really want to tell their story their way. And I think, for so many years, everybody, you've heard all this stuff about Liza and Faye Dunaway and Barbara and all of the greats. And, you know, like anything else, some of it is true. Some of it's very untrue. Some of it's partially true. Some of it's blown out of proportion. And when stars are in their 40s and 50s and 60s, their natural inclination is, let them write about me. What do I care? And I think there comes a point, which we've seen it, that people ultimately, no matter how wealthy, no matter how successful, you want to be understood the way you think. And I think there's a natural point. We did a film on the billionaire Carl Icahn, who is famous for corporate rating and activist investing. And he's been involved in so many historic business deals over the years. And he's also known as a curmudgeon. And he never really he never talked to a biographer, never let a and when we came in there and he was about 83, 84, it was this time where I really want people, he had a very controversial business deal with TWA, the airline that ended up going bankrupt. And it was, notorious. He really wanted people to understand his thought process. Why did I do this? Why did I make this decision? Things, you thought I was just trying to make money and fire people, whatever, but here's what I was trying to do. I failed, but that doesn't make what I was trying to do wrong. So I think when you hear the texture and the understanding of behind this stuff, behind choices, it makes a lot more sense. Why, Liza, did you make A Matter of Time? That was in the era where Liza made a couple of really bad movies, bomb movies. Why did you make A Matter of Time? And then you start understanding her relationship with her father. You start understanding that her father had Alzheimer's or dementia. He was the early onset of it around that time. The emotion connected with, they always talked about one day, little girl, I will direct you in a movie. And it was like, I don't think Liza gave a shit really about anything in the movie other than I'm being directed by my father. So when you understand some of the backstory, you're going to be less, pointed in criticism in saying, Liza, that was a bad choice. That was a really bad movie. You shouldn't have worked for your father. So I think all of these icons, the Faye Dunaways, the Lizas, reach a point where they want to tell why they did certain things and why they made mistakes. I think, when you're 85, you're much more open about, I kind of fucked up. Shouldn't have done that. Shouldn't have had that much cocaine while I was on Broadway. I mean,
As we start to kind of close things out, is there an icon, living or dead, that you wish you could do a documentary on that you haven't yet?
There are so many. I mean, we have a long list, and it's hard to mention them because then I feel like I put the kibosh on it. But the thing that drives me is looking for people with unique DNA, people who, for whatever reason, rose above their brothers and sisters in their pursuit. So whether we did, Stephen Sondheim and Hal Prince with our Merrily We Roll Along film called Best Worst Thing That Ever Could Have Happened. I mean, those guys were such unique thinkers. Carl Icahn, unique thinker. Liza, unique thinker. So I have been looking at a couple of showbiz people, although many of the showbiz people have been done recently. And I'm very interested in some of these Silicon Valley, people, these Elon Musks and these Peter Thiels and these Mark Zuckerbergs and these Jeff Bezos, because you talk about unique DNA. I mean, there are like 10 people who during this first tech explosion in like the 70s and 80s rose above Steve Jobs, who's no longer here, of course, who just rose above everybody. Like, why? Why did Jeff Bezos invent Amazon? Like, why him? What was the background? And sometimes it goes back and there are interesting stories of their parents and their background or whatever. And sometimes it's just, there are other reasons, but that really interests me. So the answer to your question is anybody who has unique DNA and certainly is a household name, because to invest in the time and money and that in terms of selling it and getting fannies and seats in theaters, you want a name that kind of brings kind of people in. And so, but we've been talking to a lot of the big names who I'm sure you would naturally think of a great follow-up to Liza. We've talked to all of them and they're at various stages of being ready. So
Well, I'm ready to see what you do next. But in the meantime, Liza, a truly terrific, absolutely true story, is available online to watch. People should go seek it out. It's great. And happy birthday, Liza.
thank you.
Yes,
80 years old.
80 years young.
Amazing.
Yes.
Amazing. And, she lived a robust, I'll call it, life before she was 30.
I
So
mean,
the
she's
fact from age 30 to 50 more years after that, God bless.
Yeah, she's putting us all to shame. What were we all doing before we were 30? Not partying and doing drugs at Studio 54, I'll tell you that. Once I get that time machine going, that's the first place I'm going to be hanging out with Liza. But Bruce, oh my gosh, it's always great to get to sit down and chat with you. Where can find you online? Where can they learn more about you? Anything you have upcoming that they should know about?
Yeah, I think, Liza, the film, is available on all the streaming services, Apple and Amazon, etc. I think that, you could follow my company, Atlas Media. We're working on, at any given moment, a whole bunch of projects. And I don't do personal social media because it will take 70% of my life and I'll never get anything done. No.
You're smart.
Email us your
smart
thoughts
man.
about
I
Liza
don't know if I'm
Minnelli,
smart.
Studio
Many
54,
people have shown
whatever
me
you
why
want.
that
You
is
can email
not
them
smart,
to us
but
at ticklishbiz@gmail.com
it is what it
or
is.
send it to us through all social media at Ticklish Biz, unless it's Twitter, where we're at Ticklish_Biz. That's going to close out this edition of Ticklish Business for today. We are available wherever you get your podcasts. If you're listening via Apple Podcasts or Spotify, consider leaving us a review. We would love to get one. If you're watching us via YouTube, thank you so much. You can watch the episodes over at youtube.com/@ticklishbusiness. I would like to thank our amazing patrons for continuing to support us. David, Floyd, Danny, McF, Jonathan Ruggiero, everybody who has been a great supporter of the podcast, past and present. I don't know if I said everybody who is current patron or not. Allie Moore, Rachel Clark, Gates, Shawn Goodreau, you guys all know you are awesome, and I thank you for continuing to support us. You can be named patron by heading over to patreon.com/ticklishbiz, where for just $1, you get access to these episodes 48 hours early, as well as all sorts of bonus stuff, including our bonus series, Doubled Features, based on a true podcast, and It's Like a Classic. I have some other stuff that I'm going to hopefully be doing over there. And you might want to head over to my TikTok at Kristen Lopez88, where I've been doing some really offbeat mini classic film reviews that I think our great social media manager, Jenny Hawkins, is going to be putting up on our Instagram. So be on the lookout for that. We would like to remind you that we also have membership. You can go over to our Redbubble store at redbubble.com/ticklishbusiness and buy all sorts of fun little merchandise. I will hopefully have some buttons and pins coming to the upcoming TCM Classic Film Festival. We will be back with a new episode in 2 weeks. Till then.